Welcome to the Revolution Church podcast.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Revolution. As always, we are very glad you could join us. We just finished up You Are Accepted by Paul Tillich. If you haven't heard the last one, I believe it's called The Grace is the Root. And I was really happy with it. I loved that last part of Tillich's sermon. And I really do think it explains like the heart of what we're trying to do here. And so, yeah, I love that one. If you'd like to, share it with a friend. Let people know about it. Oh, also, don't forget to like and subscribe. That really does help us get on the list of whatever they do. And plus, my kids love watching YouTube videos, and I always see them. Like and subscribe, and turn on your, I can't remember the third one. It's like turn on your alarm or your thing. The thing that tells you we're here, that thing. All right. Well, today we are going to do probably one of the toughest topics there is at this time. When I was my earlier days doing this work, probably I got some more pushback from people telling me, oh, too much grace. That was at most like, when I would go to Cornerstone or Life Fest and things like that. And they're always worried that I was maybe hiding out a license for sin. But as we talked about last week, sin is separation. I wasn't trying to separate anybody from anything except maybe legalism. Hey. Really what happened was I became inclusive for my LGBTQ brothers and sisters. I really always was. I just, when I finally got brave enough to say it out loud and folks said, oh, thanks for joining us, you're out. A lot of mainline denominations embraced me. Even some non-affirming ones at the time, they're affirming now, embraced me, which was really cool to be a part of that. But yeah, so as I got more involved with more left-leaning churches or more progressive churches or mainline denominations, the pushback there wasn't so much as it was grace, but it was grace for who? Love who? And I realized that even like just as human beings, we will struggle with the love of those who are our enemies. And we will allow pop psychology to overrule the message of Jesus. Now, I want to make this clear. This message isn't like probably based for everybody, and none of us will ever do this. It's more about progress. It's not about perfection. So to remember that as well. I think people hear someone talk and sometimes they take it very literally. They people who take the Bible literally, but they take sermons literally and think you're going to cover every single thing possible that there is. And that's just not the case with talks like this. We try, but it's not possible. And so we have to be aware of nuances and the fact that we all struggle and none of us are going to be perfect at this. But we can progress at loving our enemies. And so often are there times to be maybe temporary asterisks for us? Of course, when I went through my divorce or when I had my nervous breakdown, like I wasn't going to be the best of my abilities to loving my enemies. I could barely love my friends and I wasn't even loving myself, So obviously there's going to be times where this just is, we have to step back and breathe, this isn't a utopian dream either. This isn't, if you don't do this, you're going to burn in hell. That's the type of thing we've had in religion, and I think we have to get away from that. But this is something I believe that if you do it, you'll change the world. You'll change your life. You'll change people around you. And I would even argue to say that loving your enemies is not the hardest group of people to love. I think loving friends and family sometimes can be the hardest group of people to love. Disagreeing with those that we love and care about can sometimes be really tough. And I think if we're able to put that type of idea into perspective of like, well, man, I love my family who thinks my politics or my theology are sending me to hell, Why can't I love these other people who I'm not going to have Thanksgiving dinner with, and at the most I maybe share 1 or 2 meals with, you know what I mean? Also, one of the things I realized doing nonviolence work completely based on Dr. King's work with a group called Soul Force, about almost been 15, 16 years ago that we did this, but meeting with churches who were not affirming and bringing families who were LGBTQ and had LGBTQ kids or parents or relatives. And we met with these folks. And the difference came from us having a meal, us having tough conversations, us sharing some time together. One of the biggest, I think, successes we had was when we were in Chicago at this mega church. And it's funny because people will come up, like who were staff members, would come up to us secretly and be like, we're so glad you're here. So sometimes something's starting within a community that we don't even see, and that we're helping break something. We're not causing tension, we're exposing the tension that's already there. That's the thing, is people always think, well, nonviolence, you're causing this tension. And no, we're just exposing the tension that already lives within the system. And so this is valuable work, right? And we saw this church end its relationship with Exodus, which was this like ex-gay ministry that taught people not to be gay and told them that they could not be gay, and that ministry ended. Now, I don't think it ended because of our work. I think it ended because time has told us that those things aren't possible. But also because this community was able to hear our heart and see these people's lives. And so, yeah, there's that. So I've seen this work. And honestly, I grew up seeing this work. I grew up with my mother who always loved people. And when I mean loving your enemies, I mean loving people who walked right up to her and said, I hate you. I think you're a criminal. I think you wear too much makeup. And my mom would just be like, well, honey, you don't even know me. My name's Tammy. And she'd introduce herself. One time, 3 group of kids did it at the mall. Thank goodness I wasn't there, because I probably would have been tried to fight the mall at the time, because I was a teenager. We're making fun of her. And she introduced herself and said, you know what? I'll take you guys to Marie Callender's, which was there in the mall at the time. It was the Palm Desert Town Center in Palm Springs, or Palm Desert. And she goes, I'll take you guys up and you can get whatever you want and we'll just talk. And she went up and she just had a conversation with them and disarmed them. And I'll tell you what, whether it was TJ Maxx or the mall or after a movie, my parents always loved people. And I watched this a lot. I even remember one time we were coming out of a movie and everything had just fallen apart. Everything was just over. Like the scandal was just happening hugely. And these people had come up to my mom and dad and said, we really love you. We think you guys are great. And then this couple came by and like, well, we don't. We think you're awful, and kept walking. And I turned around because I was like 11 years old. And I went, well, we love you. Be blessed and have a great day. Now, I wasn't doing it out of the kindness of my own heart, but I was doing it out of the fact that I was angry, but my parents had shown me this idea of when someone is angry or hates you, you've got to love them. And so that's changed my life. And everybody, why is, Elton John and all these folks making, a movie about, a play about my mother, or Jessica Chastain making a movie about my mother, or my friends at World of Wonder made this documentary about my mother, and we just did a documentary with Vice about her. Why? It's because she loved people. It was her love, and so I follow in those footsteps. So this is this is the fruit of the life of Tammy Faye as well, so I've not just seen it with John Hume and, Bayard Rustin or, Gandhi or, or Harvey Milk. But I also had a mother who was very much like that. She didn't do it within what some people would say social justice issues, but she did it with people where one day she could be in a room with drag queens loving people, and the next day she could be in a room with Southern Baptists, And you could either call that hypocrisy, or you could call that love, and the type of love that Christ speaks of, and the type of love that I think the Apostle Paul talks about in Corinthians 13, especially 4-7. So we are going to look at today Reverend Martin Luther King Jr.'s sermon from this great book, Strength to Love. I got this at the King Center, along with the bust. I have of Dr. King around here somewhere. I don't think you can see it because the camera's cutting it off, and I'm in film mode, so everything's a little bit blurry today. But my whole life, Dr. King has been my one of my heroes, and nonviolence has changed my life, and allowed me to love people more, and to see people not as my enemies, but to see people as victims of misinformation and bad theology. And I know that's a stretch for a lot of people, but there's so many angry people, and if I can just help chip away at that hate and that hurt and that anger, to maybe see this world a better place. I mean, look at we're more divided than we've ever been in this country, as far as my life has been. 48 years here on this earth, I've never seen politics, and I've seen politics divide. I mean, remember when George W. ran, and in Atlanta it was like a war sticker. You had W's, and then you had the W crossed out, and it was like, But this is different. This is like people are angry, and people are scared, and people are supportive and against equally. And it's really divided us as a nation, and divided us as people. And it's something that I think why it's so vital, why it's so important, why this is like an emergency for us to start loving our enemies, because we have to have conversations. We got to have tough talks. And social media is not going to do it. I mean, we can have tough talks on social media, and I think that's important, but I think we've got to have human talks and conversations with each other within the real world as well. But we'll do what we can. So let's start on this talk. This is Dr. King's talk. It's called Loving Your Enemies. Not the most original title. But probably one of my favorite human beings to ever be on this planet. And I know it's a little weird. I've just compared my mom to these people, but my mom was really pretty awesome. And I just saw her, she knew how to give the instant reaction of love. And I've always wanted to have that, because that's not always me. I mean, I preach grace, but I also struggle with giving it at times, as I'm sure people have seen. All right, so he's quoting the King James Bible, so we don't do that a lot here. So let's jump into the ye's and the they's. This sermon is based off of Matthew 5:43 through 45. You have heard that it hath been said, thou shalt love your neighbor and hate thine enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you, for that ye may be children of your Father which is in heaven. Let's start this sermon here. So another sermon on a sermon. That's going to be my new thing. Sermon on a sermon. Graphic. So I'm going to have to create a graphic so we can put it up in the corner. Sermon on a sermon. Also, I think it's vitally important because Dr. King is someone who has literally had his life taken by an enemy, was murdered by an enemy. I've preached, if you're wondering like why I'm not preaching this on my own, I've preached it on my own. But I also recognize my privilege as a white male and all that. And I think Dr. King gives us another perspective of that, of someone who was being horrifically persecuted, and his people were being horrifically persecuted at the time. And he's encouraging us to do this. So I think we're all in this together. I'm not a big identity politics fan, but I know a lot of people are hung up on those things. And so let's see what Dr. King said, and be grateful for someone like Dr. King, and know we need more people like Dr. King and John Hume and Harvey Milk and these folks in our world. Probably no sermon of Jesus has been more difficult to follow than the command to love your enemies. Some men have sincerely felt that it is actual practice is not possible. I mean, I hear that all the time. I've seen it in comments when we've talked about it before, that it's just not possible. Some of you don't think it's possible. But look, we are here, and some of us are conservatives, some of us are Democrats. We come together in a diverse group of people, and we're making it possible. We're making this thing happen. This is the dream. This is the vision. If you're into deconstruction, I would think this is the greatest way to deconstruct this talk right here is what does someone like Dr. King, who was really up against it, says. Some men have sincerely felt that this is actually practice is not possible. It is easy to say to love those who love you, but can one love those who openly and insidiously seek to defeat you? Others, like the philosopher Nietzsche, this is interesting because I've always felt like Nietzsche missed it. Nietzsche contended that Jesus' exertion to love one's enemies is a testimony to the fact that Christian ethics is designed for the weak and the cowardly, and not for the strong and courageous. That was one of Nietzsche's big critiques of Christianity. Jesus, they say, was an impractical idealist. Now, I will just say this, that I would guess that Nietzsche never tried to love his enemies. I mean, I don't know. I don't know a whole lot about Nietzsche. That whole of Christianity is for weak people always kind of like really I didn't embrace reading Nietzsche as much as I liked more like Hegel and Tillich and, and trying to understand all these other philosophers. He just never really stuck out to me as someone that seemed and I remember reading that and being like, him saying that and being like, what? Like, my life has not been a bowl of cherries. In spite of these insistent questions and persistent objections, this command of Jesus challenges us with a new urgency. Upheaval after upheaval has reminded us that modern man is traveling along a road called hate, in a journey that will bring us to destruction and damnation. Far from being the pious injunction of the utopian dreamer, the command to love one's enemies is an absolute necessity for our survival. And I couldn't agree with Reverend King more with that. And it's so many times I've been told that this is a utopian dreamer's idea, and that grace is a utopian, and that arguing well is a utopian idea, and that finding unity through diversity is the utopian idea. And that's why I've been so excited about, reading more about John Hume and things like that, and the peace process in Northern Ireland. It's not a utopia. I mean, I love Northern Ireland, but it's not a utopia. But the idea still worked. They still found unity through diversity. They still found peace. They still had the Good Friday Agreement. Those things happened. And so it's obviously not a utopian idea. Loving your enemies is not utopian. It's not like, hey, enemy, let's sing, I'd like to buy the world a Coke. It just doesn't, it's not what happens. That clip will one day haunt me. Far from being a pious injunction of utopian dreamer, the command to love one's enemies is absolutely necessary for our survival. And this is being spoken by a man whose life was taken by loving his enemies. But he showed us how to love our enemies. He wrote the map on how to love our enemies. He took the words of Christ, much like Paul did, and told us how Paul showed us grace through Christ. Dr. King shows us how to love more through Christ and what that love actually means. And he put it not into words, but into actions. Love, even for enemies, is the key to the solution of the problems of our world. I agree. Jesus is not an impartial idealist. He is a practical realist. I am certain that Jesus understood the difficulty inherent in the act of loving one's enemy. He never joined the ranks of those who talk gibbily about the easiness of moral life. He realized that every genuine expression of love grows out of a consistent and total surrender to God. So when Jesus said, love your enemies, he was not unmindful of its strangest qualities. He meant every word of it. Our responsibility as Christians is to discover the meaning of this command and to seek passionately to live it out in our daily lives. And I think that's where it starts in our daily lives. This isn't something that happens, overnight. It's a continued process. And even for me, I feel like I've had less influence in the world, the more I've talked about loving enemies and the more I've talked about really putting grace into action. I've seen, my popularity different. So it's not easy, but what we can do is we can try this in our daily lives. It doesn't have to be about, I'm going to go preach this from the hilltops. We can try. I try the tops of the YouTube hilltops. But it's also something we can practice in our everyday lives. Reverend King goes on to say, let us be practical and ask the question, how do we love our enemies? First, we must develop and maintain a capacity to forgive. He who is devoid of the power to forgive is devoid of the power to love. I mean, did you hear that? Like, if you can't forgive, you're not really probably able to love. And I see so many folks who, and I understand it. I understand the pain. I understand depression. Was diagnosed with something called double depression, which is, I really laughed about when I first heard it, and so did my friends. And then I realized that it wasn't something that my psychiatrist just made up. And so I understand what it's like to be hurt by people, to be pushed down, especially by Christians. Honestly, I would say I find Christians to be more critical than most even normal human beings out there, maybe given the exception of YouTube trolls. I did. But it's a tough call. So no one's saying this is an easy call. No one's saying that you can do this, that you aren't going to need help, that you're not going to need people around you, that you're not going to fail at this. Again, I want to say it's progress, not perfection. And I think King explains this well because he starts the next sentence with, first we must develop. And so it's something that develops and grows within us over time. It's not this magical thing that I read it and now I'm going to go do it. And I think we often treat the Bible like that, as it's like some sort of answer book or law book. And and it's not a law book. It's a collection of writings and letters. And anyway, first we must develop and maintain the capacity to forgive. He who is devoid of the power to forgive is devoid of the power to love. It is impossible even to begin the act of loving one's enemies without the prior acceptance of the necessity, over and over again, of forgiving those who inflict evil and injury upon us. Dr. King was when Dr. King was assassinated, he was the least popular he had ever been with every community. And I can understand this is not popular stuff. This isn't like, hey, let's deconstruct and talk about those bastards, or hey, God wants you to be successful and be rich and be happy. This is basically hey, maybe we have to go into the line of fire. It is impossible even to begin the act of loving one's enemies without the prior acceptance of the necessity over and over again to forgive those who inflict evil and injury upon us. This is where dying to one's flesh, picking up your cross, those type of words that came to us that for me as a kid was used to be like, don't listen to secular music. That's not, listen to all the secular music you want. Go see the movies you want to see. But this is what it's talking about. It is also necessary to realize that the forgiving act must always be initiated by that person who has been wronged, the victim of some great hurt, the recipient of some torturous injustice, the absorber of some terrible act of oppression. The wrongdoer may request forgiveness. He may come to himself and, like the prodigal son, move up some dusty road, his heart palpitating with the desire to for forgiveness. But only the injured neighbor, the loving father back home, can really pour out the warm waters of forgiveness. It wasn't the son wanted forgiveness, but it was the father's role to forgive. Often we don't put ourselves in that role. Because often we don't, we'll get into it. Forgiveness does not mean ignoring what has been done or putting a false label on an evil act. I'm going to say that one more time and repeat that one more time, because I think this is where the big critique comes in of forgiving people. And loving your enemies is a big critique on this. And this is saying, no, it doesn't mean that. So listen to it one more time. Forgiveness does not mean ignoring what has been done or putting a false label on evil acts. So it doesn't mean we ignore it. It doesn't mean we put a fault. It doesn't mean like, whoa, okay, your evil works are okay by me because I love you. Love doesn't lie. It tells the truth. It means rather that the evil act no longer remains as a barrier to the relationship. So it means that you see it, you understand it, but it's not a barrier, that you can still love people who do bad things. Forgiveness is a catalyst, creating an atmosphere necessary for a fresh start and a new beginning. It is lifting of a burden or the canceling of a debt. And what does that do? It's that grace again that we talked about when Tillich talked about is it's that restoration grace. It's that brings us back together. You know, it restores the connection that was lost. Reunion. It's reunion. The words, I will forgive you, but I'll never forget you. But I'll never forget what you've done, never explain the real nature of forgiveness. Listen to this. Put your ears on. Certainly, one can never forget if that means erasing totally from their mind. Okay? Obviously. I mean, I'm still talking about people who wronged me when I was 11 years old. So there you go. But when we forgive, we forget in the sense that evil deed is no longer a mental block and meeting a new relationship. So it's saying like what separated us now is gone and now we have reunion. So this totally connects to what Paul Tillich was talking in You Are Accepted as well. And interestingly enough, Paul Tillich was was Reverend King's favorite theologian philosopher. Likewise, we can never say, I will forgive you, but I won't have anything further to do with you. Now, this is a tough one because I've got some issues in my own life where I've separated from people, and I've got to remember this myself. And this is a tough one. This also makes me feel convicted and nervous. So you're not alone in hearing these words and going like, you know. Likewise, we can never say, I will forgive you, but I won't have anything further to do with you. Forgiveness means reconciliation, a coming together again. Without this, no one can love their enemies. The degree to which we are able to forgive determines the degree to which we are able to love our enemies. So forgiveness is a huge part of this. And sometimes even forgiveness can be a selfish act. And I don't, like forgiving Jerry Falwell was like, obviously I'm not going to ever forgive everything you've done. I mean, we're face to face, but it freed me up from a lot of anger and hurt. It was something, and it to the point where I was like, you've got to go meet with my dad, you know, you need to sit down, because it was like, oh, this isn't all about you, you know, this is also about things that I'm holding on to that are eroding my soul and causing me to be very angry. Second, we must recognize that the evil deeds of the enemy's neighbor, the thing that hurts never quite expresses all that the thing that hurts never quite expresses all that he is. An element of goodness may be found even in the worst enemy, which is true. Each of us is something of a schizophrenic personality, tragically divided against ourselves. We talked about that in You Are Accepted. A persistent civil war rages within all of our lives, sometimes within us, causing us to lament with Ovid, the Latin poet, I see and I approve the better things, but I follow the worse. Guilty as charged. Or to agree with Plato that human personality is like a charioteer, someone who drives a chariot, having two headstrong horses, each wanting to go into a different direction, or to repeat what the Apostle Paul, the good things I would do, I do not, but the evil which I would not, that I do, which was also Tillich was talking about. So we're on the stream of consciousness here, folks, with these ideas and these thoughts. All these talks this year are connected, interconnected within what? Bringing people together, unity, reunion, and seeing sin as separation. And that's what we're going with, separation. And we are looking for reunion, even when it's a hell of a job. The simple means that there is some good in the worst of us and some evil in the best of us. When we discover this, we are less prone to hate our enemies. When we look beneath the surface, beneath the impulsive evil deed, we see within our enemy/neighbor, a measure of goodness, and know that the viciousness and evilness of his acts are not quite representative of all that he or she is. We see him in a new light. We recognize that his hate grows out of fear, pride, ignorance, prejudice, and misunderstanding. But in spite of this, we know God's image is infallible, etched on his being. The ground of being. We're all part of the ground of being, as Tillich would say. Then we love our enemies by realizing they are not totally bad and they are not beyond the reach of God's redemptive love. That's a hard one to believe for a lot of folks. I'm sure you've already got people who don't fit in your category that you're going like, well, what about this person? What about that person? Adding to the Hitler list, like, well, first, what about Hitler? What about this? Oh, what would you have said to the Germans? That's the one I get a lot of. We see this in a new light. We recognize that his hate grows out of fear, pride, ignorance, prejudice, and misunderstanding. But in spite of this, we know God's image is indefinitely etched on his being. Then we love our enemy by realizing that they are not totally bad and that they are not beyond the reach of God's redemptive love. Third, we must not seek to defeat, humiliate our enemy, but to win friendship and understanding. At times we are able to humiliate our worst enemy. Inevitably, his weak moment comes and we are to thrust into his side the spear of defeat. But this we must not do. Every word and deed must contribute to understanding with the enemy and release those vast reservoirs of goodwill which we have been blocked by impenetrable walls of hate. So for some of the folks who are online who kind of make a living in their work out of making fun of either progressives or conservatives or liberals and conservatives or whatever, often I reach out to these folks, and most of the time I don't get a good reception back when I go like, well, you're kind of scapegoating here and you're doing this, blah, blah, and they go, oh, they get really mad at me, and I understand why they're getting mad at me. And they go, what about this and what about that? And I'm like, I could live my life in revenge mode. I could live my life in bitterness. I could live my life in anger. I remember when in my 20s, when the media started coming around, Revolution, and doing stories on our work, they would often ask, like, you, of all people, have the reason to leave the church. Why would you stay? And all this kind of stuff, because they saw that there was plenty of room for bitterness. There was plenty of room for anger and resentment. And yes, those things do exist within me and still sit there. And there's times they come out. Sometimes I might be a little bit too much passionate with, especially my friends on the left, because I really do feel that they have great potential. Sometimes I might be a little bit more aggressive with them because of my pain and hurt in the past. And I have to realize that, am I projecting someone else's wrongs onto their faces? So those are things to remember. I mean, it's not easy to do. And that anger and bitterness will find ways, just like legalism does, to creep in on us and how to other people. Like, it's human instinct to want to other people. So every word and deed must contribute, to understanding with an enemy and to relate the vast reservoirs of goodwill which have been blocked by the impenetrable walls of hate. The impenetrable walls of hate. So right now, I just want to ask you guys, do you have impenetrable walls of hate within your life? And can you think of people there? You know? And I'm not saying you need to do anything about that right now. I'm just saying, can you sit and think about it? Can you understand, like, this reunion that we talked about, Paul Tillich talked about, and that we've further talked about, or the reunion that Paul, the apostle, was talking about and trying to work within the Galatians? Can we look at these systems and look at these people and see, where does their inclusion come in? Where do we play a role in being the forgiving, father of the prodigal son, standing at the end of the road? Where does that play? And is there a possibility for that? And I think maybe some of you will say no. I've always said that this type of ideal and this type of work isn't for the faint of heart. But I really do think it may be our only hope for a better future in this world, in this country, and in other countries, in politics and things like that. This might be the one thing that allows us to actually reform and see change that is inclusive for all people. We talk about being inclusive, but when you imagine those people in your mind that you feel hate and anger towards, then those are people you're excluding. So none of us are completely exclusive or inclusive. We say we're inclusive, all are welcome, and then people are like, well, does that mean you have to change if you're LGBTQ? But also, to me, does that mean you change if you're a Republican, you're a conservative, and you come to this church? Are those people also welcomed when you say all are welcomed? Those are the things to think about with this divide, because those are the people. Everybody has a different, the least of them. For my friends, I have a friend who's spent his whole life. His dad worked with homeless. He works, and for him, he loves these folks, but at a certain time, these are no longer the least of these. Maybe billionaires and people who don't care about the poor, things like that become the least of these. So the least of these does change for us all. So as you treat the least of these, you do to me. Is kind of this thing that changes and moves and evolves depending on where you stand and where the light and the shadows hit. And that's something really important for us to remember. Because sometimes we want to give superpowers to the people that we think are the least of these, and say, oh, they're untouchable. But we don't realize that now we've made a whole nother group, those who have hurt the least of these, into the least of these. You see what I'm saying? I hope you can follow on that. The meaning of love is not to be confused with some sentimental outpouring. Okay, this is King again. And I'm reading, people say, why do you read sermons? Because I could ask you all to read this stuff, but I'm not sure you would. So I'm going to read it, and we're going to read it, and we're going to go through it, because it's vitally important. And these words don't need to be just stuck in a book on a shelf. These need to be taken out and read and looked at, just like the Bible needs to be looked at. I would say this talk could be in the Bible. It should be in the Bible. To me, this talk is just as important as anything next to any of the scriptures, to be honest with you. This meaning of love is not to be confused with some sentimental outpouring, which people often think. Love is something much deeper than emotional bosh. Okay? We're not talking about emotional bosh here, folks. I wonder if Josh will pick... Josh, what do you think? Emotional bosh? Good title? Maybe not. Perhaps the Greek language can clear our confusion at this point. In the Greek New Testament are 3 words for love. And this is good. We're get ready. Get your pencils down. Let's learn. Pick your pencils up. Get your piece of paper. We're going to go to school. Reverend King is going to teach us. Perhaps the Greek language can clear out confusion at this point. In Greek New Testament, there are 3 words for love. The word eros is a sort of aesthetic or romantic love. In the Platonic dialogue, eros is a yearning of the soul for the realm of the divine. Sexy. The second word is philia, a receptacle love of intimate affection and friendship between 2 friends. We love those to whom we like, and we love because we are loved. I like that one. That's a good one. That's not a hard one. I think we all like that. I need more of that kind of love in my life. We love those whom we like. We love because we are loved. The third word is agape, understanding a creative, redemptive goodwill for all men. Did you hear that? The third one is agape. I think that's where we're at, folks. The third one is agape, understanding and creative, redemptive goodwill for all men, an overflowing love which seeks nothing in return. Agape is the love of God operating in the human heart. So the ground of being within ourselves is the agape, and realizing that in other people. Agape is the love of God operating in our human heart. At this level, we love men and women not because we like them, nor because their ways appeal to us, nor even because they possess some type of divine spark, okay? We love every person they possess because they, we love every person because God loves them. Do you hear that? We love every person because God loves them. So this is where religion also comes into this, and where Christianity comes into this, and where Christianity isn't like the most world weird, evil thing. I mean, human people are the ones who really screw things up. Our human interpretations are often the things that screw things up and divide us into groups. And God loves this group, and God doesn't like that group, and God wants to smite you, but doesn't want to smite me. You know, it's always funny how that works. We love people because God loves them. We love humans because God loves them. Back to Dr. King. At this level, we love the person who does an evil deed, although we hate the deed he does. Did he just say love the sinner, hate the sin? Uh-oh. Honestly, idealistically, that word would work. But unfortunately, it's just been so used against certain groups of people that it really has lost its meaning. And people often get the person confused with the sin. They often get the reunion confused with the separation, if you know what I'm saying. But yeah, King just said that, so hello! As I'm going to read it one more time. You can figure it out yourself. At this level, we love the person who does an evil deed, although we hate the deed they do. Now we can see what Jesus meant when he said, love your enemies. We should be happy that he did not say, like your enemies. No kidding. I mean, thank goodness. We should be happy that he did not say, like your enemies. How many here are happy? You can put a little heart, or show your hand, or like and subscribe. How many people here are happy that... That's the thing. Jesus did not say, like your enemies. He said, love your enemies. And I think we get the two confused. Sometimes I think we think like is the like, we gotta have this, that, it's gotta be this grandeur thing. And that's where utopian ideas come in. This isn't a utopian idea. This is saying, I love this person because they have the ground of being within them and they are part of the ground of being. But I do not like that they are anti this or pro that or hurting these people or supporting this. That's not, but I love them simply because they breathe air, because they think, therefore they are, I am loving them. Get this into your head. Me too. I gotta get it into my head as well. Wake up! Now we're going to cut this into a two-parter. And of course, the second part is always the best. And it's going to be long because I've been dissecting the heck out of this thing. And this is, we're almost finished. Almost finished. We might finish under an hour. Now there's a miracle. What did he say? At this level, we do not, I'm going to say it one more time because I think it's worth repeating, folks. At this level, we love the person who does an evil deed, although we hate the deed that is done. When I see heterosexism, it makes me crazy. When I see people treating my LGBTQ brothers and sisters less than, it bothers me horribly. And I think maybe that's because most of my life I've seen anger towards my loved ones and it breaks my heart. When it's towards me, I can handle it a little bit better. But when it's towards people I really, truly care about, and a community that I've always has always had a heart for me, and I've always had a heart for them, and they've always loved my mama well. And so I don't like it when people say horrible things. I don't like it when people use language that's dividing. But in my mind, I go, well, I could divide it even more by going back and telling them how horrible they are. Or how do I actually get to sit with this person and have a conversation that helps them realize that what they're doing is separating all of humanity, and that they're causing us to go against each other, and that they're leading us towards civil war rather than a community where we all can live in. I mean, this country is also divided that it's like, it doesn't feel like it's either for this group or that group, and it should be for all people. I mean, that's why compromise is just part of the realities of the world we live in, is because we live in a big world and in a country, and not everybody's going to think the same. And how boring would the world be if we all thought the same? But we should have a place that all are really actually welcome. There's truly inclusive place where all diversity, not just of face and colors and sexualities, but even thoughts and minds and politics are welcome. And there's some people who just say, no, we want to see that group gone. I mean, I spoke to a Christian influencer who said they wanted to see all evangelicals destroyed, and no evangelical church is completely wiped away. But I'll say right now, I would not be sitting here in this room if evangelicals hadn't supported me over the years. And I can honestly say, this is a hard one to say, this is hard to even put out in the ground, that evangelicals supported me way more than my progressive brothers and sisters. You know, evangelicals, gave us buildings to meet and supported us financially and did all this. That's why it was such a kick in the ass when we took the stand and they let go. I mean, so I'm just saying there's good in everybody, there's bad in everybody, but evangelicals weren't all horrible people is what I'm trying to say. As they were people who said, we see something that we believe in that we're not necessarily comfortable with, but we see something there and we'll support it until you cross the line. I'm a line crosser, so that's what happens. But I'll say those evangelicals were more supportive of me in that life. Half of these folks I still see online, and I have a private account on Facebook, and some of those folks follow me, and they're not always happy about my ministry stuff, but they love my kids a lot. They love when my pictures of my kids come up. They do that kind of stuff. They were there when I was a teenager and I was going through hell and I was smoking and drinking and things, and they loved me through that. So we can't just scapegoat a whole group of people in a whole thought process, because not everybody uses that thought process in the same, even though they might say, well, this is what I believe, but their actions show that they're actually more inclusive than we ever thought. Even when I was arguing with my father the last time, one thing he said that stuck out to me is, I'm too old to change my mind. Saying that maybe if I was a younger man, I could hear what you're saying. But I'm 84 and I just don't think, and I don't think you're ever too old to change your mind, but, you have to just I'll take the centimeter in that conversation. That way we got somewhere. Now we can see what Jesus meant when he said, love your enemies. We should be happy that he did not say, like your enemies, okay? We should be happy that he did not say, like your enemies. It is almost impossible to like some people. True. Like is a sentimental and affectionate word. How can we be affectionate towards a person whose avowed aim is to crush? And here, this is for everybody who pushes back on this, because this is what you're saying, and this is saying, I recognize you and I see you. I see it, and Dr. King sees it, so let's look at it. How can we be affectionate towards a person whose avowed aim is to crush our very being and place an immersible stumbling block in our path? An insurmountable stumbling block in our path. I mean, how many times have you felt that from like Christians and people even outside of Christianity, like politicians or bosses or things like that, insurance companies, I mean, all that. I mean, just think about it, How can we like a person who is threatening our children and bombing our homes? That is impossible. And what Dr. King is saying here is true, because his home was firebombed by the Ku Klux Klan. John Hume's home was firebombed by the IRA. And he was a Catholic, his own people. Firebombed his house. And so what am I saying is that we don't have to like that. I'm not going to ever like heterosexism. I am not ever going to agree with, I heard Donald Trump say that we should get rid of Marxists and socialists and all these people in the country, and we should take away some of these. I'm never going to ever agree with that. I think that's horrific. I don't agree with it. But I can love the person despite those horrific things. But I don't like it. I don't like it. It's not like, I want to hang out with that guy. I remember people I don't like George Bush, but I want to have a beer with him. I don't want to have a beer with him or I don't drink beer anyway. I don't want to have a Diet Coke with Donald Trump. Would I pray for Donald Trump? Yeah, of course. If he want, hey, Jay, can we meet? I'm like, yeah, let's have a conversation. Let's have some tough tough conversation. It might not go anywhere, but I'll do it. But I'll be also clear, like, I don't like this. Matter of fact, some of these actions and these ideals I hate. And I would say that also to some of my progressive friends. I'm supposed to be going to this big, beer and theology camp, but there's some people who say things that I just don't agree with because I think they're sowing discord and separating the community, and it bothers me. But I can still love them and dislike their stuff and say, hey, this is some things I thought maybe you would think about. And that's what I really do try to do that. It's not very popular though, but it's important. And I think I've got to work better at allowing my love to show as well. And say, like, well, there are things that I do like and there are things that I don't like, and make that more positive. I had a pastor friend tell me that recently. Then we had lunch. I was like, yeah, it's probably a good idea. He said, don't save the positive stuff till the end. Maybe open with that. So how can we affectionately show any affection towards a person whose avowed aim is to crush our very being and place innumerable stumbling blocks in our path? How can we like a person who's threatening our children, which that was happening to Dr. King, and bombing our homes, which happened to Dr. King? That is impossible. But Jesus recognized that the love is greater than like. When Jesus bids us to love our enemies, he is speaking neither of eros or philia. He is speaking of agape, understanding, and create a redemptive goodwill for all humans. Only by following this way and responding with this type of love are we able to be children of our Father who is in heaven. So next week we're going to be looking at what Dr. King says is the practical how to theoretical whys and why we should love our enemies. So that will be next week. So that's where we ended today, and I think there's a lot there and so much there that it's probably longer than the original sermon, our sermon on the sermon series. But I hope this has moved you to realize, like, oh, if I love them, it doesn't mean I have to like them. I mean, that might just be a revelation enough for a lot of us right there and give us more of ability. And like I said before, it's progress, folks. It's not perfection. None of us are going to be perfect at this. And within all that, we know that we are accepted, that we have been reunited with that which is greater than ourselves. Okay? And really all this is doing is saying, how can we take that into a human level? How can we be reunited on a human level rather than separate? And it's saying that if you love these people, you don't have to like it. And that opens up a great conversation. If I know somebody loves me, but doesn't necessarily like my work. I mean, people always say, oh, Jay, I love you, but I don't always agree with you. I'm like, okay, cool. I don't always agree with me either, I wouldn't want to, I don't even know. I've written 3 books, and I don't know if I would agree with all of them anymore. We grow and we change, and things happen, and we learn, and thank God for that. So there you go, the reunion. Listen, if you like this work, if you like this message, and you want this type of thing to continue, we do need your support, but we'd always rather have you than your money. Other ways you can help us than financially is by sharing these things, by liking these things, liking our talks here and subscribing to our channel. I think there's only 2 people on Instagram now who share our stuff regularly. You could share, like, do you like Revolution? Do you love Revolution? Do you think this is important work? Share these talks with your friends and your neighbors and folks on your social media stuff. That really does help us a lot, especially because we're online right now. I have been meeting with different churches here in the community, and who knows what's going to come of that, but there's some good stuff happening. But that being said, we need your support. And if you do know some way to help us financially, or if you have that extra money, I'd rather you take your kids out. I'd rather you pay your bills. That's obviously. But if you have something where you said, like, I've got this aside to help do something that's going to make a difference, that's what we want to do. And you're part of that. And if you donate, I promise that's what this work will continue to be, is inspiring people to change and grow and love each other more. And you can donate at revolutionchurch.com. We have Venmo, and we have PayPal, owned by the same company, ironically. And I don't like that. But you can donate there, and it really does help. Right now it's just keeping us at our minimum. We haven't even made our minimum this year. This month we've not met even close to our budget. I have not received payroll. We have had to pay other bills that we owe, and we've got those bills paid. But this allows me to do this work full time and take care of my kids. I do have a small part-time job that I'm doing for my landlord, and I have another job I'm being interviewed for next week, so we'll keep that going, and we will be here come hell or high water. But Revolution, I hope we can find a group of people, like maybe a foundation that will help us support our work. We had a foundation that helped support our work and really took a lot of pressure off of this kind of fundraising and type of things back in about 20 years ago, until I opened my big mouth, and I don't regret it, but we lost most of our support, and it's kind of been a struggle ever since then. So if you believe in our work, or know someone that said, hey, you know what, there's this group that supports groups that are trying to make the world a better place, maybe we could be on that list, and or at least apply to be on a list like that, so we could get more support and not feel so much under pressure all the time of because it's a little bit scary. It's financially insecure. I have financially insecure security, and I'm trying to do my best, but it as everybody knows, nobody really has money, and nobody's really hiring very much right now, so it's always a struggle. I've actually changed my application to say nonprofit rather than church, in case people are like, oh, we don't want some church guy here. Anyhow, that's the struggle. That's where we're at. I would love to be able to do this full time and do more of this full time. And if we're able to do that, we will do more talks through the week, and we'll come up with new ideas to make these things even better. So that's what we're doing right now. Me and Josh continue to do it. We're just going to continue to do the best we can and make this work as gratifying as possible for folks who are listening, and hopefully almost like a good type of medicine for us all to make it really have some hope. A glimpse of hope. I hope this has brought you a glimpse of hope today, even if it's just realizing I don't have to like them. It's just love them. So maybe I can do that. All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next week for the practical sides of loving your enemy and how we do that with Dr. King. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. will be joining us again next week here at Revolution. Thank you so much. Peace. Have a wonderful week. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed this podcast. To make your 100% tax-deductible donation today, please visit revolutionchurch.com/donate. You can also learn more by clicking the donate section on the website.